A 5-year-old is holding a knife, a real one, not a toy, not a plastic replica, a real iron blade, the same kind his father carries into battle. And nobody around him thinks this is strange. Nobody is panicking. Nobody is rushing over. Because in this world, that 5-year-old isn't really a child. He's a small adult. And the sooner he acts like one, the longer he'll survive. We think of childhood as this protected, innocent window, school, play, years of being carefully kept from the hard parts of the world. But that idea, the idea of childhood as a separate phase of life, is shockingly new. For most of human history, it didn't exist, and nowhere was that more true than in the Viking world. So, what did Viking kids actually do all day? The answer is going to make you rethink everything you assume about growing up. Let's start at the very beginning, because in Viking society, childhood didn't start gently. It started with a test. When a baby was born, it was laid on the ground, not placed in a crib, not wrapped and handed to its mother, laid on the ground in front of the father, and the father decided. If he picked the child up, it lived. If he turned away, it was left to die. This wasn't cruelty for its own sake. This was a world with no hospitals, no safety net, no surplus food. Every extra mouth either contributed or cost the group everything. And the children who survived that first moment, they were named. In Viking culture, you didn't have an identity until you had a name. Before the naming ceremony, you were not yet a person. After it, you were one of them. And being one of them came with immediate responsibility. Here's the part that's genuinely hard to picture. By age 3, Viking children were already working. Not pretending to work, not playing at chores, actually working. Feeding animals, carrying water, gathering firewood. Small hands doing real things that the family genuinely needed done. By 5, a Viking boy was given his first knife, not as a gift, as a tool. He was expected to learn to whittle, to skin small animals, to cut rope. By 7, he'd be learning to use a bow. By 10, he could handle a sword. And at 12, in the eyes of Viking law, he was legally an adult, fully responsible for his own actions, able to own property, able to stand in court, able to sail. What we call middle school, they called adulthood. Now here's what's interesting. It wasn't just boys. Viking girls had a different, but it was just as demanding. By 5 or 6, a girl was already learning to spin wool. This doesn't sound like much until you understand what it meant. Clothing was survival. In Scandinavian winters that dropped to brutal lows, a family that couldn't make warm clothes died. A girl who couldn't spin and weave by the time she was 10 was considered unprepared for life. She also learned to manage a household's food store, to preserve meat, to brew ale, to make decisions about what the family ate through a long winter, when one wrong calculation meant starvation. The keys to the household weren't just symbolic. When a Viking woman wore them on her belt, it meant she controlled everything that kept the family alive. And girls started training for that role before they lost their first tooth. But here's where it gets genuinely surprising. Viking children did play. Archaeologists have found toys, small wooden horses, carved figures, rudimentary dolls. There's evidence of children playing board games, running, wrestling. And at first glance, that seems to contradict everything we just said. But here's the thing. Look closely at what they were playing. The wooden horses weren't just toys. They taught children how to handle and care for real horses. The wrestling wasn't just fun. It was early combat training, with no adult calling it that. Even the board games taught strategy, how to read a situation, how to trap an opponent, how to think ahead. Play and preparation were the same thing. There was no gap between them. The children weren't being trained for life. They were already in it. And the sagas, the stories Vikings told around fires at night, make this even clearer. Viking children appear in them, not as protected innocents, but as characters with agency, with reputation, with honor to protect. One saga describes a boy of 9 settling a blood feud on behalf of his family, not symbolically, literally negotiating with grown men and being respected for it. In that world, a child who showed shrewdness was celebrated the same way an adult was. Age wasn't the measure, character was. Now here's the question worth sitting with. Was this better or worse than what we do today? The honest answer is, it's complicated. Viking children carried weight we'd never place on a modern kid. Real danger, real stake, real consequences for every mistake. But they also had something many modern children quietly lack, a sense that they genuinely mattered. Not in the way we tell kids they're special, in the way where their actual daily actions had actual daily consequences for real people they loved. The firewood they gathered kept the family warm. The animals they fed produced the milk they'd drink tomorrow. There was no wondering whether they were useful. They knew. We invented something in the last few centuries that no generation before us had. A long, protected period between birth and responsibility. We called it childhood, and it gave us extraordinary things: literacy, creativity, time to develop fully. But we also quietly quietly removed something in the process. The feeling of being genuinely needed before you're grown. That 5-year-old holding the knife. He wasn't a child being robbed of his innocence. He was a small person being handed the one thing every human needs to feel whole. A real role. In a real world that actually needed him. We've given our children almost everything. Safety, comfort, years of protected play. But whether we've given them that is a question worth asking. If this changed how you see childhood, subscribe. We find the stories about how people really lived that history class never told you.